Hi.
John McCarthy. I understand we're both members of the Bytown Fire Brigade.
We certainly are.
And I want to tell you how much I enjoy your posts on Facebook of old Ottawa and fire department pictures and all that stuff. I really enjoy that.
I'm glad you enjoy it. I enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
It's a great thing. It's sometimes I'm up till 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning.
Well, it keeps you off the street and look at the trouble you're not getting into.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So, I understand you don't know about the steamer.
No, I don't.
And I'm going to try and bring you up to speed on the steamer. And it's one of our crown jewels in the Bytown Fire Brigade. And it started with an anonymous beginning, and I'll tell you what I know.
Okay.
So the reason I researched it is because somebody looked at the Parliament Hill fire in 1915 and said, there's the steamer, and it wasn't there. I couldn't prove it was there.
Oh.
So I decided to start doing research on it, and I learned quite a bit about it. First of all, I learned that it was built probably in 1885 by Silsby. Now Silsby, out of Seneca Falls, New York, had a unique design of fire engines, and they were really amazing. He started his letters of patent in the United States in 1854 and kept making engineering changes to get to where we are today with this 1885. Now, keep in mind, everything's made out of cast iron. So back then, you didn't have the high technical machining that we have today, and you just make a part. Even 3D scanners, you can't. They didn't have that. So they'd make the part close to what they wanted out of cast iron, and then they would take a file and finish it off to machine tolerances that it would work. So the unique aspect of this particular design is that the boiler at the back creates steam. It's a porcupine boiler, and I think it refers to because it has so many tubes inside of it. It's for high efficiency and creating steam quickly with water. And then it would create the steam, and the steam would escape out of the boiler and come down and turn this turbine in the back here. I don't know, maybe you have to come down, David, to have a look. Okay, you got it there. So this is the rotary steam turbine. And there's some gears that rotate inside there that capture the steam, and the steam forces them to spin faster and faster, depending on the pressure that you're creating. And even so much as these little pieces right here, if you take that out and rotate it, you can get the wear parts of the gear out, and they go in with a little spring to create an even more efficient seal. Anyway, this gets spinning, creates power, and then turns the pump up in the front here. All this is done with minimal vibration. You could balance a water glass on this, where of the era, we're used to Amaskegs, American LaFrances even, were piston operated pumps, and they would create a great amount of pressure, and they would be bouncing all over the place. This has a really small pressure dome in the top that would take the vibrations out of the gears that are spinning. This is where the water goes in. This is where the water comes out. It's a fourth size, probably 500 gallons per minute, but way ahead of its time. It has a rotary gong for a warning. Get out of the way!
That'll move you.
And you really have to experience sitting up in the seat and seeing how high you are and top heavy and the possibilities of tip over. Now, Bytown Fire Brigade rebuilt these wheels. And this is a 4-foot wheel, and that's a 5-foot wheel. And if you look from the side, you can see that they're dished. And the reason they're dished is so that they can take the torques going around a corner where they would be sliding on the cobblestone. So the metal was made to slide, and it would just skip along the cobblestone, not damaging the wheel because it's dished and can take the torque. This has a pass-through for the wheels. It would allow you tight turning when you're maneuvering it by hand in the station. Anyway, so that's the engine, and the engine originally was sold to the Detroit Fire Department
Oh,
by the Silsby Fire Engine Company. And it saw service in Detroit from 1885. I have it in the history of the Detroit Fire Department book. And it was probably decommissioned and sold back to America and France in 1914, 13, 14, or 15, right? Where Ottawa, the underwriters came to Ottawa. So if you look on the side of a fire engine and you've got all the pumping information, ULC is there. And because ULC rates that fire engine, and that affects your insurance.
oh.
So in 1914, they send the underwriters to Ottawa to test all of our horse-drawn, steam-operated fire apparatus. And if they were originally rated for 500 gallons per minute, they were only putting out 400 or 300. So Ottawa went from a Class A #1 rated department down to a 4.
Oh my goodness.
Because our fire protection wasn't there. We couldn't produce effective fire streams quickly, and that was bad news. So everybody that was renewing their fire insurance would double or triple at the time, which would only be a few dollars, but it was a significant amount of money to the ratepayers. So the ratepayers got on the telephone to City Hall and found out what was going on. So the city goes on a mad panic buying spree to buy 3 American LaFrance fire engines. And the deal being that American LaFrance will supply Ottawa with 3 relief engines, so that would justify lowering the insurance rates for the interim until the 6 months passed that they were building the fire engines. Well, the only one that arrived is the Silsby from Seneca Falls, or from American LaFrance, I believe in Elmira, New York. They had trouble. The reason we can research it is because it had trouble at the customs border. Nobody's ever heard of a fire truck coming through on a train that nobody's paying the tax on, because it's not worth anything. So we eventually got it, and when they got here, much to the surprise of the firefighters, none of our fittings fit.
Oh my.
So when you go to thread your hoses on, it didn't work. So they had to make adapters to make the hoses work. It saw service probably for 6 months. Then on June the 7th, 1915, there was a great fire in the village of Russell. Actually, it was called the Police Village of Russell. And they had 2 chemical fire engines on order, but they didn't have them. So they put out a call for fire help from the City of Ottawa and EDCAN. Anyway, it was a Sunday. We know that because the fire chief said, yeah, send the Silsby down. So they had to get a locomotive that didn't have fire in the box because it was Sunday, the day of rest back then. And so they had to fire up the locomotive, get the engineer out of bed, bring him down to the Ottawa, New York Central Railway that used to run between here and New York City, but went through the village of Russell. So then they loaded this on a flat car, and of course you had to have a caboose. And they put 14 firefighters on it, and all the equipment that they need. So they rushed down to the village of Russell, put the fire out, and were the heroes of the day.
Wow.
2 weeks later, the fire chief was still trying to get the firefighters back because they were still down in the village of Russell. Eventually got them back, and what the smart people in the village of Russell did was they built a shed over this right by the Castor River, which runs through the village of Russell. And they made a wooden suction and a wooden water main up the main street. And so they used it that way from 1915 to 1954 when the boiler failed. And when the boiler failed, it was sold to Alex Dayton, and he brought it home and put it at the place next door, the Town and Country restaurant, Carling and Richmond Road. And it was in many wedding pictures from then until about 1985.
Wow.
When a conglomerate of lawyers, I guess, developed the area, and one of their holdings was the marble works, so they moved it down to the marble works outside, so it's still outside. They put trenches on the wheels, which destroyed the wheels, and there it stayed until we purchased it. I just learned today that we managed to purchase it for about $500. It really was worth nothing. Once they picked it up with a crane, the wheels just fell apart.
Oh,
Yeah, so we had to, so fortunately we had one spoke that we could use as a copy, and that was the copy that we used to make all the others. And the other thing you have to do is, these are called tires, but they're steel. And what you have to do is, they're exactly sized to this, and you have to heat them in a forge this size to get them to expand, and then put them on this hot so that they contract and hold all this together. So we needed a 5-foot forge. So we did all that work at the Museum of Science and Technology. Yeah.
gee. Boy, that's quite a history.
Neat story, eh?
Wow, that's cool.